What we're going to be covering in this video is life after death. We'll cover the ancient Egyptians' book Coming Forth by Day, which is incorrectly called The Book of the Dead by Western Academia. Reincarnation. We'll cover the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, MD, Director, Division of Personality Studies, Department of Psychiatric Medicine, University of Virginia. Past life. We'll look into part of Dr. Ian Stevenson's work spent looking into children that claim to have previous lives. Out of body experiences. We'll look at the Monroe Institute and the work of retired physicist Tom Campbell. Near-death experiences. We'll go into the work of Dr. Jeffrey Long, who also set up the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, NDERF, site with his wife Jodie. Shared death experiences. This is when two or more people share the same out-of-body experience on clinical death. Ayahuasca. We'll look into how this affects consciousness, the dimethyltryptamate, DMT aspect, and the shamanic account. Remote viewing. We'll explain what this is, the Stargate program, and Ingo Swann. You'll find that all these subjects are interwoven with each other. I feel this is important information to put out. The evidence behind this is absolutely overwhelming. The question to ask is why materialistic Western academia violently opposes this. Why this hatred? Maybe it's the case of admitting they have been completely wrong. The ancient Egyptians spent what we believe was at least 3,000 years focusing and learning about the afterlife, figuring out what actually occurs at and after our physical death. Unlike today, where we in the West have been conditioned to believe that we are gone forever after physical death, and to discuss this openly is an embarrassing subject. We also live in a world of materialism, focusing on money and what car I have, my house is better than yours, I have more stuff than you. Except when we are on our deathbeds, we panic, knowing we should have thought differently, knowing it's now too short a time to look into the afterlife. We panic inside because we know that there isn't really a God with a white gown and a beard by pearly gates, or a devil with horns, a tail and a pitchfork. This is why I'm putting this information out, since I've spent many years looking deeply as I can into this. We've all lost loved ones, however they're not lost at all. It's wrong to be conditioned to think this. Dealing with the Book of the Coming Forth by Day, also known as the Book of the Dead. There begins the account or journey after physical death, where the soul, consciousness or awareness, which the ancient Egyptians called a ka, normally represented as a bird. Also the ba, which is the personality, but for this we are focusing on the ka, goes into the other realm, which the Egyptologists call the underworld. They often travel on a solar boat with certain beings, where at their destination they are judged. Their heart is weighed against a feather. However, this feather is the feather of Ma'at, who is the archetype or representation of truth and justice. They are normally guided by Anubis, the guide of the souls, as the thereoanthropic jackal-headed human, mostly associated with this realm. The ibis-headed being, known as Jehuti, later in Greek Thoth and later Roman Hermes, scribes and records the event or the outcome. If their heart is lighter than a feather, they will continue on their journey through the afterlife, which contains many accounts. If not, they will be devoured by the Death Eater, known as Amit. This, I imagine, is going through the reincarnation stage. They may be astral beings, or from another dimension or realm to ours, or maybe even a symbolic representation of what occurs after death. What we do know is that, as well as other ancient cultures around the world, the ancient Egyptians, according to them, knew that physical death was not the end, as they compiled and recorded accounts of this everywhere. The Book of the Gates, the coffin texts, the coming forth by day, the journey of the soul, the stages involved, the pyramid texts, which are nothing to do with the actual construction of the pyramids. But by keeping the body mummified, they hoped the soul would not reincarnate, which brings us nicely to the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson. He was a professor at the University of Virginia for 50 years. He was chair of their department from 1957 to 1967, Carlson Professor of Psychiatry from 1967 to 2001, and Research Professor of Psychiatry from 2002 until his death in 2007. In the course of his 40 years doing international fieldwork, he researched over 3,000 cases of children who claimed to remember past lives. Stevenson helped to found the Society for Scientific Exploration in 1982 and was author of around 300 papers and 14 books on reincarnation. His critics say that he was being misled by the subjects. Often with critics, it's their own belief system that drives them, not the actual data. However, his requirements for a case to be considered strong were its criteria, where reincarnation was considered as the last factor.
This picture is from the official post-mortem report. Later, a child claimed to remember the miller's life. The boy had a misshapen skull. Violent death occurs frequently in Stevenson's best cases. He speculates that the trauma of such a death may cause it to be remembered. This Burmese man recalled a previous life as a notorious bandit who was captured and executed for murder.
The hanging was bungled so that he had to be hanged twice, and the subject, who had the memories of this brigand, was born with a almost absent lower jaw. His mandible was exceedingly small, and his mouth was very narrow and tight, so that he really can only take liquid food, and he can't open his mouth. But birth defects of the kinds that we have in these cases are uncommon, and they're not the sort that you find in the textbooks of birth defects, the monographs, with rare exceptions. A few of them are, but most of them are not.
In a village in northern India in the 1970s, a small boy lost the fingers of his right hand in a fodder chopping machine. Later, the child died, but in a neighboring village, a boy was born who claimed memories of the dead child's life. There was other evidence too. Lekpal's case was investigated by Dr. Stevenson and the Indian parapsychologist Dr. Satvant Pasricha.
अच्छा लेखपाल, पहले जन्म की बातें याद है तुम्हें?
यहाँ पैदा हुई थोड़े कुछ बाद जब छोटे छोटे थे तब थोड़ा याद करो करते थे फिर इलाज चलते रहो जैसे पिताजी ने मोह को ऐसे शराब गांजा पियो करते थे उन्हें ऐसी मशीन फिराई दी तो हाथ वो कटियो हम तो वहीं खड़े रह गए उंगलियां पांच उनके सामने गिरी जान तब एकदम बड़बड़ाने भी सब कि लला हाथ कटियो तब
तब तुम्हारा नाम क्या था?
हुक्म सिंह।
इस पे नाम लिखना जरा फिर से एक बार. Being born with missing fingers is very rare, and the corresponding feature in the previous personality adds to its importance. So the same fingers were chopped off. Also, there was no family history of missing fingers, and there was no such case in the whole of village.
Dr. Pasricha says a weakness of the case is that the two villages are only 5 miles apart. Details of the dead child's accident could have been known in both places. Dr. Pasricha went with Lekpal to the house of the dead boy. Inside were the child's mother and older brother. The boy was recognized and accepted by both. Lekpal lives here for much of the year.
तो आपको लगता है कि आपका बेटा ही है?
हमारा बेटा है, आइए। तो उन्हें बेटा की तरह से भी हमें मतारी की तरह से मान।
ये आपका भाई लगता है?
हमारा भाई है।
भाई आपका? नहीं, भाई तो इस जन्म में तो नहीं आपका ये भाई।
इस जन्म नहीं, पिछले जन्म में तो था भाई।
अच्छा, तो अभी भी आप इसको भाई मानते हैं?
भाई है ही।
अच्छा, कैसे यकीन हो गया कि आपका भाई है?
जब मैं वहाँ गया था पहली बार इनके यहाँ,
हाँ,
वहाँ एक शादी मैंने कराई थी,
हाँ,
तो वहाँ मैं पहली बार गया,
हाँ,
तो जब मेरे पास आया, मैं 3-4 भाई हैं, सभी जने बैठे थे वहाँ, तो इसने वहाँ पहचान लिया, बोला ये मेरा भाई है, ये हमारे भाई है, एक हमारी बहन थी, हम करीब 50 आदमी घर में, एक ही बहन है मेरे पास। अच्छा, तो कि हमारी माता जी भी है।
तो आपको लगता है कि आपका बेटा ही है?
हमारा बेटा है।
The mother of the dead boy is certain Lekpal is her son, and not simply because of the evidence of his damaged hand. In Bangalore, Dr. Pasricha is an associate clinical professor at one of India's largest mental hospitals. For 11 years, she studied evidence for reincarnation and investigated 350 cases.
Does some aspect of our personality survive bodily death? Long a philosophical and theological question, in the 20th century, this became the subject of scientific research. 50 years ago, this year in 1967, Dr. Ian Stevenson, then chair of UVA's Department of Psychiatry, created within the department a research unit, now known as the Division of Perceptual Studies, to study what, if anything, of the human personality survives after death. Dr. Stevenson's own research investigated hundreds of accounts of young children who claimed to recall past lives. In our medical center hour today, one of our History of the Health Sciences lectures, faculty from the Division of Perceptual Studies highlights this unit's research initiatives since its founding. They will also preview the unit's priorities and partnerships for its second half-century. We are delighted to welcome 4 presenters to cover this span of studies. On my immediate right, Jim B. Tucker, who is the Bonner Lowry Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences. He's also the director of the division. Next is Bruce Grayson, Chester Carlson Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences. Third is Kim Penberthy, the Chester Carlson Professor of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences. And finally, on my far right, Ed Kelly, Research Professor of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences. They will be presenting in this order. By way quickly of some historical background, I'll mention that the Medical Center Hour in past years often addressed the Division of Perceptual Studies research, especially Ian Stevenson's internationally known studies of children with possible past lives. And indeed, Ian presented here multiple times about his work. His research, like that of his successors in the division, is, I think, especially noteworthy for the scientific rigor with which it was performed. Indeed, Dr. Stevenson's standard for impeccable science was extraordinarily high, and it even continuously challenged him in his own work.
I hope you found this brief account interesting. Stevenson was the leading researcher in this field. please look into his work. I'll leave the links in the description. Out of the body experience, we will deal with the work of Robert Monroe. Robert Monroe was originally a radio broadcaster and researcher who also founded the Jefferson Cable Corporation. In 1958, whilst experimenting with sleep learning, he experienced what he describes as sensations of paralysis and vibration accompanied by a bright light shining on him at an angle. This occurred 9 times in 6 weeks, culminating in his first out-of-body experience. He went on to become a prominent researcher in the field of consciousness and set up the Monroe Institute. In 1975, he patented HemiSync, an audio technique designed to stimulate brain functions until the left and right hemispheres become synchronized, which could be used to promote wellness or either an altered state of consciousness through the use of sound. During this time, Robert Monroe was granted a secret security clearance by USA Inscom in training Center Lane personnel in gaining information through an out-of-body state of consciousness. This coincided with the Stargate project, which I will go into on remote viewing later on. Since the death of Robert Monroe, his daughter took over the Monroe Institute, which was set up as a non-profit organisation. However, they do charge for courses. I have personally tried the initial part of the HemiSync program, but I did not achieve an out-of-body state. My dreams are more vivid, however, I can state that I had great success in remote viewing. Now retired physicist Tom Campbell, originally a skeptic, worked with Monroe and achieved an out-of-body state with his own colleague, who was in fact situated in another area of the facility. Now, this is going to be a hard pill to swallow for most, but not for all, as many people that understand the famous double slit experiment and the data erasure experiment after shows it's actually a form of digital reality of information that we live in. Hence, we are not actually supposed to be able to astral project, remote view or reincarnate back into another body, but this is possible. Or as quantum entanglement of 2 particles, no matter the distance, are joined, or the superposition of particles, as well as many other factors. I'll leave a link to the video that I'll show just part of next. I'm not trying to endorse Tom's book, My Big Toe, meaning the theory of everything, but it's worth reading. Also, Kurt Jamunga's channel, Theories of Everything, is full of great information to take you down the scientific rabbit hole with the facts. This is also not the opinion of just one physicist alone.
Detectors in these little red spots will be detectors here and here and there and there. Now, they have this probability, and when they detected a particle here, they made a measurement, right? When they made a measurement, the data stream has to tell them what it is they got. Well, the data stream tells them they got a particle, so they made a measurement. After that, what can they do? A particle now has been found in this reality, headed that way. All it can ever do is do what particles do, right? They travel in straight lines unless acted on by some other force. That was one of Newton's laws. So they go in a straight line and hit right there, because it's a particle. Up here, it's not a particle until it gets here. Here's where the measurement's made. See? It's just probability until it gets here. Now the measurement's made. See, here's the measurement screen. The measurement's made here, and the question is, where is the particle most likely to land? Well, it's most likely that they're in the middle, and then the other 2 white spots, and the other 2 white spots, and so on. And it lands there with that probability. So you see the difference? This is where the measurement's made, so you get a particle here. No measurement was made here, so it's still probability here and here and here. You don't get a particle until it's the screen. All right, now, here you get a particle here, and then it stays a particle. So that's why that works. Okay, well, the way it works with the delayed erasure is that it's still probability. All right, you haven't looked at the screen yet. We're doing this experiment. Let's say we're doing this experiment, and we make the measurement, but we don't look at the screen. Well, if we've got data here that says there's a particle, then we have to get light here and light here. Otherwise, it would be inconsistent, right? You'd have a reality that was inconsistent. But if we take that data, and before we look at the screen, we'd erase it. Now, where is there an inconsistency with a diffraction pattern? There is none. There's no data that says that there were particles. There used to be, but there isn't anymore. You know, somebody says, yeah, but there used to be data, and you say, prove it. It's gone. There isn't any data. So we don't have that data in here, and until we actually have that data available for people to look at, now the people don't have to look at it, it just needs to be in a computer or somewhere where they could look at it, then there would be an inconsistency if you didn't have particles. But if there is no data, then there's no reason to have particles. You go to the default answer, which is probability. And if you display the energy here in a probability, when it hits, you get a diffraction pattern. You see, so even though they took that film out of the camera, when the experiment was done, there's nothing necessarily on that film because reality doesn't start until you get data from the system to you. You see, until you make the measurement, it doesn't exist. It's only potential. It exists as probability because the way the world works is everything is probability until you make the measurement.
When dealing with skeptics who say out-of-body work is nonsense, before they even try to attempt to do any techniques, they will have their prior belief system it doesn't work. Obviously, when they attempt a series of different techniques, it won't work. This will, of course, psychologically strengthen their previous belief system and other colleagues that say the same thing. Dr. Jeffrey Long, MD, is a radiation oncologist, known for his pioneering work on near-death experiences. Throughout his career, Dr. Long has worked in numerous clinical settings, often utilising cutting-edge technology to improve patient outcomes in oncology. He was intrigued by the profound stories shared by individuals who had been clinically dead, but then revived and described vivid experiences of another realm. Dr. Long founded the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation in 1998, which has become one of the largest repositories of documented near-death experiences. His book published Evidence of the Afterlife, The Science of Near-Death Experiences, appeared on the New York Times bestseller list. Despite this being a taboo subject, people do actually want to know. And why wouldn't you? Strangely, on Wikipedia, which is an edited platform commonly edited by materialists, his page has no criticisms of his NDE work. At present, there are over 5,000 documented NDEs on the site, not to mention the sheer mass of other recorded data from resources to various paintings and artwork from people who have had previous NDE near-death experiences. Also, quite a common misconception is that all NDEs see a tunnel of light. A lot do, but not all. The more one seriously looks into this, you will find it's all out of body and consciousness based. NDE accounts 13,115 recorded on the 24th of the 11th 2024. While I was walking the 4 steps back to my body, I saw these waving ribbons of coloured light. They were knee high, and when the ribbon of light passed through me, I felt the love, peace and joy that the ribbon contains. I knelt down next to my body and looked at it. I thought, that body is still viable. I knew that it was my decision, but I was torn. NDE due to being struck by a truck, part of NDE shared by emergency technician EMT who was at the accident scene. This is a shared death experience, entry 9907, recorded the 17th of the 4th, 2024. We are still in the tunnel, and I realise I can no longer join them. I can't cross this point. I don't see a door, but I feel the tunnel ahead of us open. My grandfather goes first. His guide goes next, and I feel the tunnel close. I am suddenly very aware of how lonely and cold I am. I hadn't noticed the warm, comfortable light coming from his guide until it was gone. Exceptional shared death experience dream with grandfather at the time he died. Near-death entry 9841, recorded on the 9th of the 3rd, 2024. What purpose? I asked them. This is hard to explain, but growing and shrinking shapes also help explain their words. Their explanation was that everyone is here for a purpose, each purpose having an intention to a bigger purpose. This is like a rock thrown into a pond. Each ripple then becomes a wave that pushes little pebbles up onto the shore to where a bird might find it, using it to aid their digestion, while they fly over a barren land, dropping small seeds along with that pebble in a field, growing flowers for the bees later in the summer. 3 exceptional NDEs at ages 7 to 8, later in childhood, and age 18 due to car accident. Illness with high fever and during emergency caesarean section respectively. Includes apparent shared NDE at time her baby died during the emergency caesarean section. What is ayahuasca, also known as Mother Ayahuasca? It is a powerful medicine taken and given by shamans to teach you through your own consciousness a tough lesson on truths you yourself ignore and hide away from. However, it also acts as a form of portal into the other realms we in the West ignore. Even though through high energy physics and quantum physics, we know there are now 37 provable other dimensions existing alongside ours. Originally, this figure was 9. What most shamans say is we in the West have severed our connection to spirit. However, I feel this is rapidly changing as certain events are forcing people to rethink. Regarding the DMT, dimethyltryptamate, part of the brew, I will explain this after a short clip next of someone most men look up to and will recognise. The West, or the Western world, pushes the word drug with ayahuasca, knowing the negative connotations the word drug carries, and slamming the deep knowledge known and carried over 2,000 years by this culture.
You know, and you really need to do a lot of soul searching. You know, the way medicine's done, the way therapy's done as in society, and whether you've been through any of that, I don't know, but it will not go as deep as ayahuasca can. And that you won't know until you do it. But
I think that's what I'm looking for, that extra depth. Because I've done a lot of therapy and stuff like that, but I think there's something else there.
Yeah, because the thing is, you imagine, right, trauma is like a stealth assassin. It's so subtle, but yet so impacting that you don't know it's even happening. Like at any time throughout my trauma, I just said, no, I'm fine. Yet when I look back, and hindsight is a great thing, but it didn't win any wars. But it's a great thing to reflect. And by looking back over my life, over a massive span of my life, I've gone, right, that makes sense. You know, for me, that whole incident with the chimp taught me something really incredible, and that was the fact that it taught me, you know, in that moment, and we mentioned this on the last interview, on that moment when I got attacked, you know, and I actually surrendered in the moment instead of attacking, you know, retaliating. I lay down and just died, and I allowed, you know, what would happen, I questioned myself, what would have happened if I'd not fought that day? And I'd have been dead. But through that ayahuasca experience, I then did die, and I became spirit. and it was the most amazing experience ever. I died and went to the spirit world with my wife. Now what that taught me afterwards is the fact it was stop fighting. And I realised by looking back after that experience, it made me realise that everything in my life I'd fought against. And I don't mean being in the military, forget the military, I mean against society. I probably always fight against that, but anyway, against society, against schooling, against everything, against authority, everything, my relationships, everything I was fighting against. And it was about surrender. The most powerful thing with ayahuasca is you being able to surrender. And obviously for me as a Special Forces soldier, that's a really bad word that I can't, it's hard to accept. But it's hard to accept for anyone.
Ayahuasca is from the ayahuasca vine and leaves from the chacruna plant found in the Amazon. It has a naturally occurring chemical containing DMT, which is also in many other types of plants. The body won't absorb DMT naturally, which is why the chacruna plant properties allow this to be possible. DMT is also known to be released at the time of our death through the pineal gland, which sits behind the pituitary gland in the centre of the brain. Philosopher Descartes referred to this as the seat of the soul. This gland has rods and cones associated with vision and light. It also secretes melatonin at night time. Since DMT is a powerful psychedelic chemical, it's argued that NDEs, OBEs are just a release of DMT from the pineal gland, causing the vision. This, however, is not the case due to the evidence accumulated by NDEs, having knowledge of, say, when their physical body is on the operating table, but their astral body is down the hospital corridor, hearing other consultants discussing certain subjects. There are numerous experiences to back this up. Dr. Rick Strassman believes that DMT allows the pineal to act as a gateway for our consciousness to access other realms. This brings us onto the subject of remote viewing. What is remote viewing? This is when you can arrive at what's known as a target, which could be an event or location anywhere on the planet or even in the universe, or in the present, past or future, since time is not actually linear, all with your subconscious mind. Are they psychic? I would say no in the term we think of. Certain psychics may be able to see a certain event, whereas a trained remote viewer will be able to move around that event days before or after and go to different locations. How does this work? Not going into the detailed training involved, there is normally an analyst, a tasker, and usually 4 to 5 remote viewers in order to collaborate the data. The work is done blind. The tasker will give the remote viewers a random set of 8 numbers, which in his mind represents the target he wants remote viewers to see and report on. They are not told what the actual target is. Through a series of techniques, the remote viewer's subconscious mind will know instantly what the target is, which is then extracted out to form the information required. All this information is then given to the analyst to put together. The analyst, like the remote viewers, will also not know what the actual target is. Upon his interpretation of the data, it will then be given to the tasker, who will then know if the remote viewers were on target. Again, we are going back to the scenario of consciousness being able to move or connect outside of the physical body. This is no different from the fact of 2 particles, no matter the distance involved, being entangled. By changing the spin direction of one, the other will instantly reverse. We are all points of awareness, which is a form of energy. Why is this so hard for most people to understand? The simple answer is, we have been conditioned not to think this. I feel I also need to mention that there are quite a few charlatans on the YouTube platform and elsewhere. A few single people who say, I've remote viewed this and I've remote viewed that. If the session is not done with a team where there is no tasker or analyst, I wouldn't pay any attention. One word, clickbait. However, there is one person who developed a skill to be taught to others in remote viewing. His name is Ingo Swann, and his work is incredible. Firstly, I would buy his book, Penetration. It's called this as it's a breaking through the world of secrecy. When asked by people who knew him personally if the things written were true, they said yes. He is not at all a person that would lie about it. Ingo was a natural psychic who was found when the US discovered a lot of their secrets were known by the Russians during the Cold War, and the Russians were investing a lot of time and money in psychics, which Russia as a whole does not believe in. However, they had actually found a way it worked. The US tested Ingo constantly, morning till night, in order to believe that Psi actually worked and that there was no other influence affecting the testing. One event that occurred was when they took Ingo into a sealed room. Where he was standing, he said, "Where's the clock?" which was an atomic clock located under the actual concrete. They asked him to draw it. When he did, he affected it, not deliberately, and it stopped for 2 seconds. One of the scientists ran out of the room to tell others and knocked himself into a post, being shocked. The atomic clock had never stopped running before Ingo arrived. They do not stop as per design. Along with Howard Puffoff and Russell Targ, he developed the technique of remote viewing, which is what led to the creation and running of the Stargate project, which officially ran for 10 years. There are a number of incredible events written in his book dealing with first-hand evidence of other intelligence, which I will not spoil with a 2-second discussion. Buy the book. Thank you for watching this video till the end. I hope some of this is new to you, and that when discussing consciousness, awareness or energy, it makes a little more sense.